Hello, I'm Dennis Kelly, CEO of Postalytics and host of Print to Pixel. We are joined here today by Steve Smith, who's the Chief Revenue Officer of LiveOak Fiber. LiveOak Fiber is, as I've learned, the largest greenfield fiber project in the world. And Steve is one of the founding team members. He's been building this thing from scratch. Super excited to have you, Steve.
Thanks for having me, Dennis. I'm excited to talk about our company and our project and meet you.
Awesome. Excellent. Why don't we start, Steve, by getting into your career, your background, how you got to this point, and then what you're doing at LiveOak today.
Sure. Well, I accidentally got into telecom in 1997. And there was a new company. I'm from Denver. There's a new company in Denver. They had just changed their name to Quest. It was QWEST. And I was the sixth guy in the wholesale group. So I just needed a job at the time, and I didn't know what any of this was, but I got lucky, and it was fate. And I ended up with the company, and we built. Over the course of 6 years working for Quest, we built thousands of miles of fiber. At that time, there was really three companies building fiber. There was Quest. We were building it on the rail lines, which was awesome. We had these custom rail cars that when you're building fiber, it's all about right of way. So I called it the fiber. It was the era of the fiber barons. So we built fiber on railroads. Level 3 built fiber on highways. Their big backer was the Kiewit brothers out of Nebraska. And then there was the Williams companies out of Tulsa, and they built fiber on natural gas and oil right-of-ways, pipelines. Today, all those companies are one company. I believe they're Lumen. But back in the day, we were all racing to connect NFL cities. And once we connected an NFL city, then we would try to build the other cities, and then we would build within the city. So I had a lot of opportunities that I was afforded and really worked with some great people. So I ended up moving from Denver to Boston, and I moved up and ran wholesale for Quest in Boston. And if you know anything about telecom, and I picked Boston, if you know anything about telecom, why would you pick Boston? Because everybody's in New York. And I think I'd been there one time in my life, but I came home one day and told my wife we're moving to Boston. We did. And it was great. We built a lot of fiber, connected a lot of customers, and my career kind of just went from there. I ended up working, over the course of a career for a couple of my clients or customers. I've started a couple companies. I started a data storage company. At one point, my friend and I in Denver, I moved back to Denver. We did that. And then, ended up back in telecom pulls you back in, but I've always been in technology, but I've been in telecom for 25, almost 30 years now. And, prior to LiveOak, Jody Kraft is the other founder at LiveOak, and he and I had a consulting business, and we focused for 7 years on consulting with, operators around the U.S. They ranged from really small rural operators. We saw a really big need for small rural companies that they couldn't get the level of executive expertise that they needed, muscle in certain areas, technical, sales and marketing, operations. And so we felt like there was a need. We had a lot of clients that were small, but we also did a lot of work for some very large companies. Like at the time, we were with Sprint Global Wireline. And at the end of it, after they got merged with T-Mobile, we were the last consulting firm standing. So through a lot of those relationships, we started to interact more with private equity. We did a lot of work for SoftBank and some of these large funds that are trying to understand the fiber market in the United States and what it's worth and what the value is. And there's been a lot of investment in that space over definitely in the last 10 years, but I'd say the last 5, it's really amplified. So through that's where we started doing some work with Infrared Capital Partners. And they were an infrastructure fund out of New York and Europe. And they had a similar company in Europe, but they wanted an investment in the United States. And so we had a business plan. We worked with them, and they funded it. And so in July of 22, we launched LiveOak Fiber, and there was a couple of us. There was 4 of us, and literally 4 of us in a spreadsheet and a PowerPoint. But we had a plan. We had a good plan. And what I like about our team is we have all the executives on that team. Myself, Jody. Jody started off as a tech. He started off as a tech in the Air Force, and now Jody's the CEO. But he's been a CTO. And I started off cold calling and doing everything, fetching coffee for meetings. I did all that from that to be lucky enough to where I am now. And it's the same thing for, over the last 2 years, we've hired great people like Shane Schilling. Shane Schilling's our COO. Shane came in and same deal. Shane started at the bottom and, has worked his way up. Chris Bach is our CFO. Chris is, I think all CFOs at some point started banking and auditing. And, Chris has been fantastic. He's been a great ad for us to, raise some money. We've raised a lot of money, I think, the last 24 months. And then we also got Jennifer Powers. She came to us through the Southeast. Jennifer's worked with a lot of companies that have done high scaling and rapid hiring. So it's been busy over the last 2 years, but we have got a great team. They've got a bias for action, and I think that's allowed us to be successful. It's allowed us to talk to other people and say, hey, we want to fund this. We want you guys to do more. So yeah, that's kind of how we got
an amazing
started.
Story, incredible growth, and I guess recently bolstered by big new financing with JP Morgan. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, we're very excited about JP Morgan, and what a great American institution. Wow. I mean, the gold standard. And I will tell this interesting story about JP Morgan. There is a connection to our markets. One of the areas that we serve is the Golden Isles of Georgia. That's Glynn County. And there's Brunswick, and then there's St. Simon Island and Jekyll Island. And, back around the turn of the century, JP Morgan and a number of, financiers from New York, they would go to Jekyll Island, and they established the Jekyll Island Club. And it was the 100 richest people in the United States at the time, and they built cottages. The cottages are somewhere around 15 to 20,000 square feet. But,
it's like the cottages in Newport.
Right. Yeah, no, look, they're still there. And that group of people, that's where the Federal Reserve was born, was through that. And the Jekyll Island Club is still there.
Wow.
And some of the cottages are still there. You can go see it. But those group of people, they formed the Federal Reserve, and the first transcontinental phone call originated from Jekyll Island.
Huh.
And because of where it sits, its longitude is the same as Cleveland, Ohio. So it was kind of like the best, most eastern, but the most western eastern place that they could get. And they did this phone call. They've got a museum there. So anyway, there's a connection to JP Morgan. I don't know that they knew that when they gave us
and a great telecom connection too.
A great origin story for that group. So yeah, so we're excited about it. It's fun.
That's very cool.
Thanks.
And so, back in the days where you were at Quest, and I remember those days. I was in early internet startups myself. I'm pretty sure you guys are laying backbone of the internet, right? And now it's more about kind of fiber to the home. Is that accurate?
No, I think you're right. I think it's a lot like a road infrastructure. So originally, I would say the long haul fiber is your interstate highway system, and then you start to build exits off the interstate fiber, and then you start to build secondary roads, and then you start to turn gravel roads into paved roads. And if you look at maps, I mean, you could even go back to the railroads where those connected infrastructures sit, that's where growth occurs. And today that growth is where the fiber. So you take that paved road and I use the analogy, you're connecting someone's home. The reality is you could put 100 gigs to someone's home should they have, a need for that. You could put 100 gigs to any of these locations. And I know there's some companies today, there was tests recently as a couple of years ago, they're running 400 gig, signals over fiber. And the great thing about it is it's extensible. So it has a long life. It's really limited to how many colors can you break up light. And that's just the boxes on the ends. So once you have that glass, the fiber to the home, then the capability for long-term, extensibility, like whatever services you want to put on that. You want to put VR. You want to put, Netflix decides they want to go to a 16K movie, whatever that looks like. Those decisions can be made, and the consumer can take advantage of all those applications because the foundational connectivity is there. The road is there, so to speak.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's exciting.
And I think, that presents a good transition for us. And so in your role at LiveOak as Chief Revenue Officer, I think that marketing probably rolls up under you. Is that accurate?
It does. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, we've been talking a lot about tech, right? And so how do you and the marketing team at LiveOak kind of take those very technically focused things that you're building, right? And all the energy and everything and effort is very, very much around, right of ways and then building out very technical things. How do you translate that into things that make sense for your target audience? And maybe why don't we start with your target audience? Who are you trying to appeal to, and then how do you make that translation work?
Well, in the areas that we serve, our target audience is every home and business that we pass. Whatever, if there's a building and there's a person or something in it, we have an offering for them. And what we find, and it's probably with any technology, if someone hasn't had it, there's a curve. So if haven't had it, you can't market speeds. You can't market things that they have no context for. You have to market to really how they're going to use it. And this would go with any, anything that you would sell or market and tell the story about. But it's really just kind of that simple. And so that's kind of how that's the ethos that we have going into it. But then you have these market conditions that, so for instance, most people in the United States have ordered something on Amazon, and that's the experience they have with online shopping. And if you're a service provider and you're not thinking about I'm not saying everybody can be Amazon. I'm just saying every customer that you're selling to has had a great online experience, and whatever that is. And so you have to think that drives the pace. So you have to translate, all right, what's great about Amazon? Well, number one, it's easy. And then they do, they know what you like. If they know what you like, they know other things that you might like, that you can add those things to. And so that's the digital side. And then, in rural areas and probably even I would say anywhere, the traditional advertising still works, and it works well. And we absolutely use it. We try to be efficient. We're not trying to kill all the trees on the planet, but there's ways to get, once you have the message right and things that, not everybody is on. I've found, like, for instance, if you try to sell internet to a community that hasn't had high-speed internet, they're probably not streaming as much. I know they aren't. They're not working from home as much. So they don't really know. So they might not be on the platforms that you're trying to reach. Probably might be on Facebook. That's the, whatever, that one. But they still get direct mail and it can get delivered. And in our business, it's all address based. So we have to deliver a message to a specific address. That's how we look at it. So we understand, we track all that, what happens at every address and how we do it. And the message is important, but it's around the applications. People don't buy a speed. They buy, what it can do for them,
Right. Yeah.
It's like anything. So
yeah, it's hard to quantify gigabytes, right? In your brain, like what does 5 gigs get me that one gig
right.
didn't?
And then why should I buy the big one? I mean, and listen, don't get me wrong. We're selling to the Southeast region. There's a group of people that wants a Hemi in it. What's the biggest thing you got? I want that. There's all you're just whatever you're selling. That group of people's like, yeah, what's the biggest? I want the baddest. My neighbor Jim's got it, so I have to have that. You're going to have those people, but right. I mean, if you're trying to give them a better experience, and the way we do it is we kind of talk about how big their home is, and it's not because the router doesn't reach. The routers can reach the home, but to have an optimal experience, certain size homes, you might need more extenders, and certain size homes probably have more devices. That's been our experience. It's kind of I'm trying to understand customers. More devices means more applications, and definitely, streaming is huge. Cisco publishes a report every year, and they'll tell you like 78% of the world's traffic is video, and they're watching stuff. And every internet operator I've ever worked with or known, between 6 and 9 p.m., that's when everything gets redlined. That's when people are watching stuff. So that's not daily emails, but, so that's how we try to understand our customers. And I don't want someone to have to be an engineer to pick a package. What combination of Sudoku puzzle do I have to put on the website to get the upload speed that I'm like? That's crazy, and that's something we try to do different at LiveOak is I want to try to buy things the way I buy things. That's how Jody and I looked at this project. And it's like, it's actually like, I think as an industry, we've gone too far. Like we've done it to ourselves. We put people in weird contracts. I think the biggest myth on the internet is these data caps. And the internet by nature is an unlimited potential. And when you talk about a data cap, I think is like is there a lake internet somewhere that like is evaporating that I don't know about? It's not that it's so we don't have data caps because it's a ridiculous concept. If it's only not ridiculous if the connectivity is like a coffee straw trying to drink a milkshake. Yeah, you probably should get him a bigger straw. And if I only, sold milkshakes with coffee straws, I'd say, hey, there's probably a limit on what you can use. But no, that's where the LiveOak mentality is, how we look at customers and how we think about products. And it's like kind of plain, it's almost too simple, but that's again, and if you look at the successful platforms, you look at an Apple, and people have perceptions Apple versus Android, but you look at these platforms, they're strong. Like they make it, they're very simple and elegant. There's a lot of complexity behind that, and things that look simple and are elegant. Customers are like, oh yeah, that's why people line up outside of an Apple store because it's like that easy, and they understand it. Like Apple has that thing where it's like when you're connected to the Wi-Fi, it's like someone else in your family is connecting, and then it'll say, do you want to share the password with? That simple thing. I've had a family of 5. That's great. That's a super easy thing to do. And, and then it's across all of marketing, like how you look at customers think about your product. And, look, we've got some work to do, I think, and all providers. I say all providers that are overbuilders, we're all in the same boat. We're competing against people that are absentee landlords. They've made their money. They've sold cable TV. The last innovation they've had has been the internet, frankly. And so we have to overcome all these bad behaviors, these misconceptions about things. I should do this contract so in 24 months I can call a call center and wrangle somebody around and try to get the best deal. Stuff like that. There's a lot of operators like us will do price for life. Why not? And customers are like, I don't know if I believe that. Well, okay, but there's no contracts and there's no data caps, and we just want you to try it. And I would say that people that get connected to fiber have a phenomenal experience once they get it. But yeah, it's again, I just think about the customers and how they use it. When I think about different kinds of customers, like I think about my mom, and my brother is a very technical guy, and we dreaded, moving my mom to a streaming service, because she's got certain things she's going to want to watch. It's not really the things, it's how she gets to them.
Right.
So we're like, we got to get the Roku with the speech button. And, my mom's great, but how do I get to Turner Classic Movies? Where do I find Gunsmoke? Like they have Gunsmoke. They have specific things that you've got to kind of, all right, how do we do this? And working through those processes with people like my mom and I know Shane Schilling brings this up a lot. He's like, I think about my sister. I think about what's that real person look like? And you kind of put yourself in their shoes for a minute. And then you start to understand how, okay, I think I know how I can reach this person. And you start to kind of develop this process. And I feel like we're blessed at LiveOak to have people like that. We've got a guy named Lou Martinez that Lou's from New York. He's built fiber all over the world. He's built fiber you build fiber in New York City, you learn a few things. And Luz was like, look, I think we're going to need a Pardon Our Dust campaign because we're going to make a mess here. And so this goes into messaging. Our project is 100% underground. Not everybody does that, and I understand that, but ours is that way intentionally because of the weather conditions that exist in these coastal areas. And Lou was like, hey, we need a Pardon Our Dust campaign. We need a way to let people know we're going to make a mess. And the first option, if you call our number, is you get Lou's team. Now, if there's a live person 9 to 5, but there's a voicemail box and that gets answered. We break sprinkler systems. We hit water lines. We hit everything, not intentionally, but it's a construction project. It's underground and there's a mess to be made. And so we have this extra message about, hey, this is temporary, but we will fix it. And again, that's kind of like understanding the customer philosophy. And we're blessed to have people like that say, hey, before we do this, I have this idea for this. This will work well. And it served us well. So we have a very customer-centric group.
Yeah, I've seen over the years where when the core executive team hires people with those same values and same beliefs, it becomes really a part of the brand. And
it does.
And over time, you don't build a brand overnight. It takes time, it takes repetition, it takes consistency, not only in your marketing efforts, but in the application of those values, right? And so over time, you're able to stand out. And like you said, you're competing against people that made their money a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
Laying cable. And, I remember so clearly in the pandemic, working from home. I was on a cable provider at the time. And there was a certain time of the day when the internet would go like,
right.
Right. All of a sudden we weren't having this call.
And it only happens when you don't want it to happen, right?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
Absolutely.
But it was consistent, right? Like the network just couldn't handle what was being put out there. And so, by the way, move back to Boston. We need you.
Well, yes, and I did become a Red Sox. It was easy to become a Red Sox fan, and I've got New York friends, but if you grow up in the Midwest, you just are taught to hate the Yankees. So it was easy to be a Sox fan,
right? So
it's a natural thing. So it's good, but yeah, I hear what you're saying. And look, I think in Denver, Comcast is a great network, and I would travel around the country, but in a lot of other places, it's abysmal, and it's not a reflection. It's just that's how things are. If you think about, I guess the analogy I use a lot is your yard. I'm not a yard guy, but the yard that's important to me is what's important to my wife, which is the parts of the front and maybe a few feet off the back patio. There's corners there, that I'm not going to get to. I'm sure there's some weird things back there. I'm sure there's possibly a snake and there's definitely weeds. And that's how it is for cable companies. And that's why rural America is the back of the yard. Mm-hmm. Lovely. I love rural America. I'm just saying, like, they only have so much money, and they're going to fix the parts of the network that they can for the best impact. And you're right. They've made a lot of money over the years. But I remember, I thought you were going to go back to when like cable TV started, when we went from the 3 channels on the TV to the cable box. Now you've got 10 channels. Remember that? And like ESPN, like all
ESPN like, TV.
And yes, right. When they actually showed videos, I was like, "Oh my god, man, this is fantastic!" Yeah. So cool. Anyway, dating myself, but yeah, technology. But since then, I think there's the pandemic taught. Pre-pandemic, at our consulting company, we used Office 365. We never use Microsoft Teams ever. I'm like, why do we have this? Is there an option where we could unhook this? Like, can we pay less per user? We just need, the basic. But man, once that pandemic hit, everybody, I don't know if you remember, but it was like for 30 days, I felt like I had like club hands. Everybody had a different sharing tool, a different platform. It was the audio, like working out the kinks. And now it's kind of flattened out. Now I'm kind of living on Teams and stuff. And, but people realized, and that also, I think, was a fundamental shift. That's one of the reasons we picked some of these markets, because people realized, there's probably 15% of Americans are working from home full time now. And there's probably 40% of Americans that are working at home in some capacity. And there's companies that were our clients, and there was other companies that said, hey, you can work from anywhere. That's true as long as the connectivity exists.
Right.
And so people want to go. We're blessed. We have great people do want to go to the areas that we're building. And a lot of people have been there. But the infrastructure doesn't support that sort of thing, but it will now. And that's an economic boom for some of these counties and places. Now people can come to rural America because the connectivity exists. And I think there's been a lot of effort in that over the last 5 years, and they'll continue. So yeah, I think that's great. I think it's a good thing.
It is. Shifting a little bit more into, you do some direct mail.
We do.
You have business customers, you have homeowners, or residences you're selling to.
Right.
Sounds like a personalization opportunity. You talked about the size of the building, maybe as a way to kind of calculate messaging. Are you able to institute any of those kind of personalization concepts into your direct mail? And I'd be curious to see, how are you able to drive these messages to these unique ideal customers, right? Using an offline platform like direct mail.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, look, I think the QR code, unknown, relatively. I take that back. There was a guy we worked with. Maybe he's listening to this. Eric Tammy. He worked with us when I was at General Telecom, and that was the first time I saw one. And Eric was brilliant at coding databases, and he came in and said, I'm changing my business card, and it's going to be this QR code. I don't even know what it's like. What is that? And then, that was the first time I ever saw it. And that was probably like 2007. And then fast forward to the pandemic, every restaurant, and still today, a lot of restaurants, there's a lot of good things that came out of necessity. And a lot of restaurants like, hey, we don't have to print paper. We could just do this way. And then some did better than others, developing an online, mobile platform for guests and stuff. But yeah, so that QR code now is, everybody knows what that is. It even comes up on, live TV and stuff. So for us, it's the connective tissue is either the QR code or unique phone numbers that track, the response rate on the mail. And, we also at a macro level will look at if we do we do a lot of testing too, but if we do a large drop, we can see KPI, we can see other KPIs. Mm-hmm. We can't necessarily tie them back to it. Dale Earnhardt was a great driver for NASCAR. He would drive around that track in Daytona and he would put his hand out the window, and that's when he knew how to draft. Now, there wasn't a gauge on the dashboard that said draft now. Like, he would do that. And so when I think about direct mail, I think of like an orchestra. And so I think we've got digital, we've got direct, we've got audio. And then I can put my hand out the window because we can see all these KPIs. We can see inbound phone calls go up. We can see sales go up. We can see scans on the QR codes. We can see those numbers hit. I'm like, okay, we've got it. So
very cool.
We've got the kind of the right message. That's kind of how we do it.
Yeah.
We're definitely data driven. But look, the more data driven you are, you can end up boiling the ocean. So we're trying to get to those Moneyball stats that make the most sense. And we're not quite, it's a work in progress. But yeah, direct mail plays a big role in the marketing orchestra, in my opinion. It's
very interesting, and
guaranteed to be delivered. If done correctly, it gets read. You might have to do it a couple different times, but yeah, we've seen success off it, and I think there's stats that other companies have seen this too.
Absolutely,
right? There's been a pickup in direct mail. Yeah, so it's a thing.
No question. And I like that analogy of the orchestra. there's a phrase a lot of people like to use, omni-channel marketing, right? But I think the concept, like the visualization of that orchestra, is a better
Yeah,
analogy, because these things all have to work in concert, right?
they
And they
do.
have to be conducted, right?
That's right.
And they have to read off of music that is that somebody's put together, some sort of game plan,
Right.
and when they work together, it's beautiful. When they don't, it's pretty bad.
It's very obvious. It's that junior high entry level band concert is what you get, and
Yeah,
you're like,
we've
wait, I
all been
paid
in them.
$100 for this seat. What's happening here? What is that guy doing with the timpani drums? That's weird. Yeah, all that. So
One more direct mail question. What
sure.
do you see as the biggest pain point in your direct mail operation?
Oh wow, that's a great question, Dennis. Man, it may not be specific just to direct mail, but when you think about a customer journey, I think at some point customers hear the music, but maybe they respond to one thing versus the other, but they've heard all the music, So it's hard to say, well, that person called specifically for this. And I know people want that answer, and I'm sure we will get closer to that answer. But I think that's something we kind of strive for. I don't think one particular piece of the marketing orchestra is going to, I think people have to see it a lot. And I think it's, like I said, I think it's kind of a key role. I mean, it almost is like the percussion section, because it's steady, boom, boom, boom. It's keeping the cadence right. But yeah, I think that's the pain point. Like, can you specifically tie those things together? Sometimes you can. Sometimes you can.
Yeah. I like that a lot. Direct mail is the percussion section.
It is. You can have that one, Dennis.
That's it. I'm going to use that, Steve, and I'm going to give you attribution as a part
one
of that.
time. So. I think that's the rule. Is I get one credit once, and then it's yours. No problem. No problem.
Awesome. Before we wrap up, Steve, I know you feel very passionate about what you're doing and the impact that your project at LiveOak has on the communities you serve. Tell us a little bit about that, like from your view, as a founder, as a member of the founding team, you're on this great project. You're in the middle of it. You got all this stuff going on, right? What are those feelings you have about that work and why it's important? And it's got to help drive you through all this.
Yeah, I think that I personally have seen the impact of connectivity in rural America, or just connectivity in general. In larger communities, people have options, and people don't always have options in rural America. Sometimes it's hard to get the skill set, or hard to get companies to make that investment. But we've seen investment, and we picked these places intentionally because we knew no one was ever going to fix anything there. During the pandemic in Glenn County, they had to send some kids back to school because they didn't have the connectivity at home to do their homework. And for those that don't know, what that looks like is you drive to the McDonald's and your kid does his homework, and then you upload it on the free Wi-Fi. But there's only a couple of McDonald's there, right? So, and then you're having to buy the nuggets and the milkshakes, and it's expensive. But that's a thing. We've had clients that we've got a lot of weather over the last 2 years. We've had a client that was, they posted on social. It's a pharmacy. I think it's Golden Isles Pharmacy over in Georgia. And they said, we're so happy our internet is up. The storm had come through and knocked a lot of people offline. He said, but, it would have been nice to have a day off, but LiveOak Fiber stayed up. So we stayed open. It was good like that. So that's what I've seen in the communities. I'll go back a little bit. One of the projects that Jody and I worked on, we were at Ritter Communications together. And one of the projects we worked on was a telehealth network. And at the time, the state of Arkansas was ranked, this was 2013, 2014. No, this was 2012. They were ranked 52nd in terms of stroke-related deaths. That's after Guam and Puerto Rico. Okay, so you can't finish lower than that. And the reason is because, stroke identification, you can have symptoms, but if you don't have a medical professional that understands those symptoms, it can deteriorate rather quickly. So their project was a telehealth network that would touch all 75 counties, and it would have, some counties would have more than others, but it would be this connected, and it was a kiosk. It was actually really cool. It was like a cart. It had a monitor, and it had all the connected tools on it. And so Jody and I spent a lot of time, and we won our little company at the time, Ritter, won, probably about 30-40% of those locations. And we connected them. And in the beginning, they, if you're in a rural area and you're like having at-risk pregnancy, or they started like stroke, stroke was the main driver. After that thing was operational, Arkansas moves to like in the top 10.
Wow.
And it's the University of Arkansas Medical Sciences. And it was a guy named Alan Finney. I think he's still there. But that program is the gold standard for telehealth in the United States. They were the first ones to get that rolled out to everybody. Now, not everybody used it pre-pandemic the way they should. But I guarantee you, the biggest hang up with that was just the billing with the doctors. But the experience, like if you had to drive 3 hours, think about that for maybe an at-risk pregnancy. That I just think about that. That's what's dear to my heart. But strokes, there's no way. But if you can go to your clinic and get on a kiosk and talk to a doctor and diagnose that immediately, and then the people know what to do because they have the capability to fix it, then it can fix it. And then imagine connecting that network to other states. Imagine being able to talk to a specialist in New York City from Walnut Ridge, Arkansas in 30 minutes. And then you have the pandemic hit. And thank God they had that set up. And now you can actually have people come in. You can do the whole COVID protocol. You could make it safe. They could talk to doctors. And it's like a thing now. It's a real thing. And so that was impactful. And, that just reinforced, Jody and I's belief that the internet can be used for a lot of things, but that's using connectivity for good. And that's been impactful. I know in that state, and I know in other states as well. So
that's great. I think, not everybody's aware of the lack of connectivity in rural America. And it's great work that you and the team are doing and others in the space.
Thank you.
It's not all about squirrels on surfboards on the internet, right? There's real
which is
world
great,
impacts,
of course,
and real lives, right? And
real lives. Yes,
that's awesome.
Yes,
very cool. Well, Steve, it's been a pleasure to speak with you today. I really enjoyed learning about your journey, about the work that you're doing at LiveOak. I'm gonna borrow / steal your orchestra metaphor for a direct mail percussion
Absolutely.
section.
You can hashtag it, and I'm going to get in trouble. You can slide it into the DMs. That one's for Katie Rose.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, really appreciate you coming on today, and we'll look forward to seeing the build out continue down in Georgia and Florida where you're working, and continued success.
Thanks, Dennis. Thanks for having me on, and look forward to talking with you down the road.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.